For those of you who don't know me, I am a licensed clinical social worker. I have been doing private practice since 2014, so about 6 years now. And I started at Reineke Counseling Associates, who have been in San Diego for about 30 years, amazing group. And then we all split up last year to do individual practices. So we're all still in similar offices and work together. But last year I launched my own practice called One Life Counseling. So I generally see individual women working through marital issues. I see couples, I see young adults. That's generally, I do trauma, anxiety work, and different marital struggles as well. So that's a little bit about me. I love what I do. I miss seeing my clients in my office here, but hopefully a time will come soon where we can have those connections again. But as Jerlyn said, I would love interaction if you feel comfortable. If not, and you just want to be, on mute, that's totally fine. Whatever feels right for you. But I love the more interaction, the more dynamic and fun it'll be for us. So often I can just engage. I have your chat box up, so I will have that. I'll try to keep an eye on that in case anything pops up there. But feel free to unmute yourself as well and jump in. And if you have a question, we'll do that. I'll leave time at the end for questions. So throughout our time together, if you do have something, just write it down on the paper and we'll get to that. And I'll try to leave some time for us for that. Let's see. Yeah, so let's just jump in, and the paper will be for some exercises we have for you to answer some questions and write those down as we get through it. So I do have a couple handouts that I'm going to go over as well. I'll share with my screen, and I'll give that to Jerlyn at the end to send out to you guys if you'd like them, those resources. And if you have any other questions, you can contact me after this as well. So what I want to go over first is today we're going to go over a couple things, but really two key parts that I've noticed in quarantine and where we're at right now that we have to face is one, knowing ourselves better, having more insight to what we're feeling, why we're feeling it, and what we need. That is going to help us be successful during this time. And in the past, we could find different coping mechanisms, staying busy, going out, traveling, or being in the office late, so we've had different coping tools we've used that aren't really accessible to us right now. So we're having to face ourselves in deeper ways than we've had to. And number two, what I'm seeing to be successful in quarantine is having to have better and more brave communication with the people that we are with. So we're going to go over both of those and break that down a little bit of how to become more insightful with ourselves and our emotions and our needs. And then secondly, how to communicate better, because if you're anything like me, I've had a lot harder conversations than I've had to have this year in the past 2 months because of just constantly interacting with the same people, and we're going to have friction, we're going to have differences. And so how do we maneuver through those successfully? In times past, we'd be at work all day and wouldn't have to have those hard conversations necessarily. And we have more disconnect. It's forcing us to have deeper relationships, deeper connection with people, because we're forced to either have awkward silence around each other in the house or really face what's coming up, right? So we'll get to those too. But before we do, I just wanted to go over one concept that we're all experiencing to some degree or another, and that is the concept of grief. Grief and loss. Okay, so I'm going to share briefly with you. Let me pull that up one moment. Okay. So just briefly before we get into those other two topics, I want us to look at grief. And as we're going through this, again, I don't want this to be educational. We have enough information overload these days. I want this to be experiential. I want this to be reflective. I want you to take a moment as we're looking at grief and loss and do a little bit of self-assessment here, okay? So the pain from loss and change is called grief. It's the discomfort, it's the pain, it's the challenge from loss and change. We've all had, whether it's good change or bad change, whether it's good loss or bad loss, it still can bring up grief because of the loss and change that's happening. So as you see, grief comes and goes like waves, right? There will be more waves, and sometimes it'll be more calm. So a part of grief, there's shock, there's denial, there's confusion, there's anger, there's depression, there's anxiety, and all of that is very normal as we maneuver and walk through a lot of loss and change in this season that we're in. And then, of course, we don't stay there forever. Feelings are temporary. Emotions are temporary, right? So one moment we may feel a huge wave of grief, and the next moment we may feel peace. It comes and goes. It's ebb and flow. And ultimately, through it all, we see healing and growth from times like these. And so I want you to take a moment on that piece of paper. I want you to identify for yourself, take a moment, what has been the biggest loss and change for me in this season, right? For me, as an example, is independence, right? My independence, my space to be alone, being able to drive my own car places and go to restaurants, for me, it's minimal, but it's still loss and grief, right? I can still grieve that. Some people, it may be loved ones they've lost or way bigger changes, but we can't minimize each other's loss and change. But so there is a scale, there is a degree of grief we're experiencing. So take just a minute here. And ask yourself, what is the biggest loss and change that I've experienced through all of this? I see there, Lindsay, you've experienced that roller coaster of grief and peace back and forth, and we can feel so bipolar at times. It's like, wow, what is going on with me because of the roller coaster? Yeah, and not being able to socialize with friends and family, Brenda had mentioned, that is such a huge, huge loss. Virtual just doesn't cut it for me. I want a big hug. Yes, Geraldine, I've heard that with people, not their prenatal appointments and even ultrasound for the first time, there's so much grief in not having your husband with you because it's something that you look forward to your whole life for some of us. And yeah, the celebrations of that being stolen, it feels stolen, similar with weddings. It's just like it feels like it's robbed from us. Yeah, yeah. Mm. And when we have those big griefs, we have to feel it. We can't just put on our big girl panties and act like it's okay. We're allowed to grieve that just as much as anyone else grieving other things. So we have to feel that pain that comes along with this. Jesse said loss of control of mine and my family's future. Yeah, it's the reality that we are not in control is right in front of our face, and we're reminded of that. every day. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Courtney, you said loss of doing things instinctively. It totally, I've experienced that too. Or it's like, oh wait, I can't shake your hand, or I can't, just different things at the store or whatnot. It is so weird. I have to catch myself too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, someone else said, Allison said, definitely control, unable to help with my dad's life and future health. And that feeling of helplessness at times. Oh my gosh. Can anyone relate to that helpless, powerless feeling? Yeah. And it's just like, uh, I don't know about you, but when I feel helpless or powerless, I get angry. That's how I respond personally. And some may respond differently, but that powerless helplessness, we're going to react to that some way. It's going to come out, may come out on our family. It may come out on roommates or partners. So that's a very, very common feeling. So that really is a backdrop of a lot of what we're experiencing, right? A lot of our emotions that we're experiencing are going to come from a lot of this, from this backdrop of grief and loss. And whatever degree that is, we're all experiencing this differently. We're all having different impacts differently. And so we're all in this together. And at the same time, we're all individuals experiencing this so differently, and maybe not people we live with not feeling the same thing as the other. So I want you to be aware of that grief and give yourself permission. There's no right or wrong way to grieve. Give yourself permission to be on that roller coaster, and know that it's temporary. Our emotions are temporary. If we feel that wave hitting us, know that that there's going to be a flow, and there's going to be an ebb to that. And sometimes that can help us to tolerate the waves that keep hitting us. It's like, okay, this is temporary. This is going to come, and this is going to go again. That these waves don't stay indefinitely, but it's a ebb and flow, and that can help us tolerate it a little bit more. Yeah, thanks for your interaction, guys, and your input. A lot of it's nice to see people's experiences, because it's like, oh yeah, me too, so let's look at those two requirements that I mentioned at the beginning that require us, that is required to be successful in this time, in some way, making it through. The first being more in tune with ourselves. We are responsible for this own work for ourselves, is knowing ourselves, right? So I like to name our that it's like different parts of ourselves come up, right? And that can be different emotions we feel anytime you're triggered. That we can all know what triggered feels like. Anytime we're triggered, that's a part of us saying, hello, I'm here, right? So I have this part that I've become very aware of recently, of this obstinate part, this very stubborn part in me. And I've always known that, but I've been trying to get to know it a little bit more, be aware. For me, when this obstinate part comes up, it's because I'm not actually feeling heard. I'm not feeling respected. And so this part is my defense. My, knuckles come up to fight when I don't feel heard or respected by family at this point, or friends, roommates. And mostly my family gets the brunt of it. Anyone can relate? Yeah. So I've been doing a little work during this quarantine, trying to understand this obstinate part and what it's trying to do for me. Because there's always a function. There's always a function to these parts. Okay. So as we're learning to be more in tune with ourselves during this time, the first aspect of it I want you to write down is identifying my various parts, my different parts that are trying to communicate or do something for me. Identify these parts in ourselves. It could be an angry part. It could be a helpless part. It could be the obstinate part, defensive part, controlling part. All these are different parts that can come up. Anytime that you feel triggered, that's a part. And so while we're home a lot, I want you to practice being self-aware of these different parts coming up, right? It's gonna happen a lot, and we miss it if we're not paying attention. So right now on your paper, I want you to write down just one part that you've seen a lot this quarantine. Maybe one part that you're like, whoa, this is keeps showing its head, right? And I want you to name it. I want you to write down on your paper what part is coming up most right now. And it's going to be that anytime you felt triggered, if you want to go with that, when was I last triggered? What part was that? Or what keeps getting triggered in me? If you need a little help with this, there's an acronym: HALT: hungry, angry, lonely, tired. I need to halt. If something's going on, ask myself if I'm hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. So it could be one of those. Maybe there is a lonely part that keeps coming up, right? Maybe there's a tired part, an exhaustion part that's trying to shut down a lot. Yeah, if you want to share in the chat box, what parts are coming up a lot for you guys? What's one that's showing its head? Yep, anger. Yep, me too. I've had that one popping up a lot. Yes, the tired, exhaustion. That overwhelming, that shame. Yeah, maybe, I wonder if a critic is coming up a lot for some people. I know it has for me, like a self-critic where it's criticizing me to be more productive or criticizing me for not, do this or that. So our critic could be rearing its head up a lot, trying to get us to in a certain acceptable behavior or lifestyle or something along those lines, trying to be perfect through this quarantine or be the most productive or something like that. So critic. Yeah, there's a jealous part coming up that it's like, that comparison. It's like constantly comparing to other people's situations and wanting something different. Yeah. So the next step in knowing ourselves better is now I want you to identify what this part that's popping up a lot, right? What is its purpose? It has a good intention, even if it's anger, even if it's the critic, even if it's exhaustion. There is a good intention of this part that keeps popping up and it's trying to communicate to us, right? So what is the function of this part? For anger, the function could be this anger part comes up because I'm an indicator that you need to set boundaries. I'm an indicator to protect you from getting walked on, right? I'm trying to protect you. The critic of our perfectionists, the critic could be trying to make us a better person, even though it's not helping a good way. The critic is maybe the function is trying, it's in good intention to make us a more kind, loving person or holy person, right? So there's always there's always a purpose for these parts. We have to dig into that a little bit. For exhaustion, that part of exhaustion could be telling you, slow down, take care of yourself, right? It could be saying, I'm here to tell you to set boundaries. I'm here to tell you you're going to crash if you don't change what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Then that unworthy part, right? That I see, that unworthy part, I wonder what the function of that would be. You know, maybe that unworthy part is saying, I need love right now. Maybe it's saying to you, you need a hug. You need to remember that you are loved, and maybe think of some memories where you felt loved before. So all these different parts that we're experiencing, I want you to begin to get to know those as they come up, and pause and ask yourself, like, okay, what is this part trying to do for me right now? And how can I meet that need for myself? So this takes time, and in therapy I help people discover these things and help identify it. So it can be hard to do on your own, but it's good to at least try to begin that self-awareness of these different parts, instead of letting them jump in our front seat and drive the car. We stay in control of our car, and these different parts can be buckled up in the back, right? And we can notice them, but not let them drive our car. We don't ignore them. We don't put them in the trunk. We acknowledge them. We listen to their needs, and we stay in control of our car, our emotions, our behaviors, right? So it's really important. If we're not aware of it, then the people around us are gonna pay for it because we won't know what's going on here, and they won't know how to help us, right? And so it's our job, our responsibility to be more in tune with ourselves and know what our different parts are that coming up, and what is it trying to do for me, and what is it that I need to do for this part. Maybe I need to say no. Maybe I need to say I need a break. What is this part communicating to me? And so go ahead and maybe write down anything else that, as we reflect on this one part that's coming up for you. And Elizabeth, you wrote exhausted from meeting everyone's needs. Yeah. So it sounds like that part of you is saying, hello, I need some needs met too, right? Before I keep meeting everyone else's. So we need to listen to these parts of us that are coming up, because they have valuable information for us to be more whole. Lindsay says, what part is it that makes it hard to identify, focus on just one part? That's a great question. And that part would be like a manager, right? That part would be that part is trying to, maybe it's a perfectionist part where it's like, I need to get all of this under control, or maybe it's an out of control part, right? Of wanting to fix it all right now. So it's a good question. And even guilty, I should be at work, right? So what is that guilt? The guilty part, it sounds like it's really has a high work ethic, right? Has a high work ethic, high integrity. That guilt part is trying to keep maintaining that integrity and high work ethic. And so we can say, hey, I hear you, guilty part. I hear your good intentions. And I'm going to continue to have integrity and work hard. And I'm just going to need you, guilty part, to give me a little bit space right now, because in order for me to work hard, in order for me to maintain this integrity, I'm going to need a nap, right? So we acknowledge the needs that that part is telling us, and we don't ignore it, or else it just is going to get mad at you, right? So we want to identify its needs and give ourselves that, and then we tell that part, hey, I hear what you need, and I'm going to work on that, and for now I need you to give me a little space so that I can actually do that. Yeah, and Courtney, you said the shame and critic, I'm depending on the opinion of others versus focusing on my identity. I'm not able to please everyone, and that's okay, for sure. And we can talk to that critic part of us. We all have a critic if we're human. And so we can talk to that critic and thank it. Thank you for trying to help me to be such a servant like Jesus, right? Thank you for pushing me to put others' needs first. I love that quality, and critic, right now, in order to put others' needs first, I have to focus on what's before me right now. And that may be, focusing on that. I won't be able to please everyone, and I'll do what I can. So it's kind of like as we would talk to a kid, it's like we have little kids in us sometimes that come out and pop its head out. So we want to talk to it like an adult and say, okay, I see you. Let's figure out how to have a win-win situation here. We can maintain integrity. We can maintain a servant's heart as I still take care of myself in these ways. Does that make sense? It's a new way to be self-reflective. For me, I've found it really helpful to clarify and organize my internal world, because we have all these different parts popping up, and it's like it can be overwhelming. So sometimes we've got to just choose one at a time to move forward and move through these emotions that pop up or triggers. And the key is identifying what its function is, what it actually needs from us. So that's key. But hopefully you were able to identify that at least one part, and that's coming up a lot, and identify maybe what it needs, and taking time to acknowledge it and then move past it. Yeah, the irritability and overwhelm is totally communicating. Find some alone time. Yeah, like Geraldine said. That's so good, and it's so easy to lose our boundaries during this time. It feels like kind of everything goes out the window, right? And it's like, whoa, how did this happen? I need to regain what my needs are, and express those and implement those. So the next part of being more in tune with ourselves is really noticing the intake of information, our information diet, right? We've heard that phrase before. What is my information diet, and what feels good, what doesn't feel good, right? So we naturally can just scroll through internet, social media, and we're just taking in all this information. Maybe we're getting a ton of podcasts sent to us or YouTubes to watch, right? I want you to think of it as your diet, even your Netflix, even your movies you're watching. That's all an information overload, right? It can be overload, but I want you to be intentional with your information intake and be intentional with your information intake. This requires us to know what feels good, to be aware of ourselves as we're intaking information. Okay, I don't know about you, but there's certain things I'm more sensitive to this. I can feel, I have a hard time watching certain shows or TV because I just feel a lot from that. So I have to be extra cautious of my intake. So during this time, it's easy to intake a lot of information that makes us feel terrible. It's like eating junk food. It's like not going outside on a walk. We're going to feel what we take in our bodies. Okay. So Don't think that it's just, it won't do anything. You will feel some way or another with whatever you're intaking. It's just like our food that we eat. We can feel great after a meal, or, that it's fresh or homemade, or that it's drive-through. We're going to feel the difference of what we eat in our body if we're paying attention. And we need to learn how to identify physically how we feel after information intake. So I just want you to be very aware. So on your piece of paper, I want you to write down, what's one information that you've been taking in that is causing negative feelings, that has been causing you to feel a certain way that is not helpful for you. Maybe it's that comparison. Maybe it brings that comparison. Maybe maybe it just makes us feel numb after watching Netflix. What is it? What's one source of information that has been having a negative impact on you? And what's one information source that's been having a positive impact on you? And that can change. I love the prophetic, if you're familiar. I love prophecies and hearing what God says through people spiritually. And at first I was like taking in all the prophecies and YouTube videos of all these people. And then I realized, whoa, it was good. And now it doesn't feel good. And so I need to pause on that, and I can get back to it maybe another time. And then a month later, I'm like, okay, I can listen to a couple of these, prophetic words and whatnot. Now I feel like it's more beneficial. So even something that feels good at one time may change, and may feel more of a negative impact on us, right? So we just have to constantly be aware. Did I feel good after this? Did it help me, or did it harm me? And that's going to be different for all of us, right? So as we become more in tune with ourselves, the first step is identifying our parts coming up, right? The second is to be intentional with our information intake. And then lastly is regaining internal control. Let me break that down. We have, like someone mentioned in the chat, that control is out the window, right? What can we control? We feel like there's nothing that we can control. So part of being more in tune with ourselves is it's focusing on what we can control in our internal life, in our own little bubble, individual bubble, and letting go of what we can't control. So what I want you to do is draw on your paper 2 circles, one circle like this, and then an outer circle around that. So we're going to do one circle like this, and then a circle around that. If you can see something like that. Yeah. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to identify what we can control, what we can't control. Okay, and the way for this to be beneficial is to be specific. We don't want to say too general of things, or else it doesn't feel helpful. So in the circle, and I'll go over a couple examples, you're going to write on the inner, it's probably backwards, in the inner circle of what I can control, and on the outside is what I can't control. So you're going to write specifics in each of those circles. So for example, right, what I can't control is how, my partner spends their time. What I can control is setting a schedule for myself. What I can't control is how my roommates behave and treat me. What I can control is expressing my needs to them. Does that make sense? So it's very specific. So anywhere that has been bringing you anxiety is going to be in the outer circle of something you cannot control. So that's a good indicator to identify wherever you've been feeling anxiety, anger, frustration, it's probably because you're trying to control something that's not in your power to. So I want you to identify in that outer circle, what are things that are triggering me, that are causing anxiety specifically? Maybe it's things about your partner or your roommates. Maybe it's situations at work, right? Or how they're rolling it out, or what they're communicating, what they're not communicating. I want you to think of maybe it's a team member, maybe it's a kid, right? It's going to be the pandemic. Can't control when the government is going to open things back up, or when they're going to communicate. So I want you to be specific, because that's how it can be helpful for you, is what am I trying to control that's out of my control, that's causing frustration, anxiety. Okay, and then on the inner circle, what I can control. In this inner circle, this is where we feel empowered. This is where we feel peace. This is where we feel in control. And we have to focus on what's in our inner circle, right? I can control my behavior. I can control what I think about. I can control how I spend my free time. I can control processing my emotions, right? I can respond to my emotions instead of ignoring them. I can meet my own needs. I can express my needs. I can take myself on a walk when I need it. So this middle circle is key for feeling empowered, getting out of that trapped feeling, getting out of that powerless, helpless feeling. This is the place that if we're feeling anxiety, we need to go straight to this inner circle and say, what can I control? What can I do for myself right now? I can control how I respond to my family. I can, so this is key in feeling powerful and empowered, instead of anxious and powerless. So again, anytime you're feeling anxiety, go back to this circle and identify, what am I trying to control that's out of my control? And what am I going to focus on instead? What am I going to do that I can do to help myself in here, instead of focusing on what other people feel, think, do, and say? Okay, so we're bringing it back to ourselves. So this is the last part of becoming more self-aware, becoming more in tune with ourselves during this time. It's kind of, whether we want to or not, we've been forced to be more emotionally intelligent, more emotionally in tune with ourselves. And these three parts, identifying our parts, being intentional about the information intake, and then lastly, in focusing on our internal control, what we can control. These are huge. This takes a lot of practice and time, but if we go to those three things, we will feel much happier. We will be able to get through this much better, with much more peace, and peace in relationships, internal peace. This will be key if you focus on those three things. And then the second part of the two requirements in managing this quarantine, so the first one is being more in tune with ourselves. The second is being more open in communication. Okay, I'm going to give you 3 parts to communication that will help with family members, roommates, coworkers, and it's 3 words I'm going to give you for helpful, easy, simple communication. Maybe not easy, but simple. Let's say that. Brave communication is hard, and it's vulnerable, and it can be challenging for us. So it's simple, but not always easy. For this simple communication, I want you to write these 3 words: fact, feel, and need. Fact, feel, need. This is your new formula for helpful communication, okay? Um, it is a simple way that we can learn to communicate and give each other feedback. And this is essential for the situation we're in. Again, I said we could avoid conflict before. We can just go to work or leave the house, right? We're faced with awkward tension if we don't communicate. And so the fact, feel, need. This is how it sounds. Fact would be when you're going to choose a specific fact, right? When you slam the doors all day long or slam the kitchen cupboards, I feel anxious. I feel angry. And what I need is for you to try to shut them more carefully. Okay. So one part of this that people like to do with the feeling is make it about the other person. I feel like you're an idiot for doing that, right? I feel like you're ignorant for not knowing that already. So the feeling part, we want to keep about ourselves. What am I feeling when this person does that? Right? So another fact could be, hey, when you said to me last night, ... right? And you're not going to interpret it. You're going to just verbatim. When you said this, you're going to repeat what they said. You're not going to interpret it like what you thought they meant. It's going to be verbatim. It's a fact, right? When you said this last night, I felt disrespected. And what I need is to understand what you were really saying, or what I need is for you to communicate in a different way so I can feel respected, or what I need is for you to use a calmer tone next time. Okay. Fact, feel, need. Since this is experiential, we're going to practice. Okay. So everyone pick something that you're going to need to communicate to a partner or family member about, or a roommate. Something you need to communicate to them. Write out the fact, when this happened, or when this happens, I feel or I felt. And what I need from you next time is this. And again, when the fact has to be factual, not when you hurt my feelings yesterday. It's when you said this, right? It has to be very factual for this to work. And then when we share our feelings, it has to be about us. What do we really feel? Try to be vulnerable there. I felt disrespected instead of, it's easier to say angry. That's not too vulnerable. It's harder to say I feel unworthy. I felt disrespected. I felt vulnerable, right? Or exposed. And what I need is this in the future. Okay. So these two things, that's all I'm going to give you for the communication. If you practice that, you will see what a difference it makes. It minimizes the emotional reactivity, but it is still open, vulnerable, and honest to get somewhere. And we can use that when you close soup plantation. I felt disappointed and hungry. I need you to reopen. I love it. Good one, Courtney. Yes, so we may have to use that multiple times, that format, right? So we may have to say a fact, feel, need again. And hopefully your partners or roommates can use that too, because it's really helpful. Okay, and I want to get to a few questions if you have any. A little Q&A. I know we're running out on time. But was there any questions to what we talked about today that you need clarity on? Let's first get questions on what we covered today. And then if nobody has any questions on what we covered today, we can answer a couple questions just generally. You can text your question, or you can just unmute yourself and ask. Yes, I will send Geraldine the grief handout. And that's good for kids too. Kids understand that, or teenagers. A lot of my teenage clients are experiencing a huge loss, you know, with school and college students. So it's good to share with your kids as well to explain. So I'll send that.
Can I just ask straight instead of text it?
Yeah.
Because I don't know exactly how to word this, but this process in general has been super helpful. But is there any guidance that you would have or advice for even like getting past the obstacle of starting something like this? Like I know, just for myself, like I struggle with a lot of the self-reflection and just that, you know, that internal recognition. And so these are great tools, but sometimes there's just that obstacle of like actually getting in that space to understand and see and recognize all those, you know, all these aspects. So any just advice or tips you'd have for like even jumping past that hurdle?
Yes, I love that. And actually I had planned a little exercise that we can do at the end that will actually help you with that. What it sounds like is you need a couple minutes of grounding, of some would say meditation, of just taking a moment to, of course, as Christians, we're not emptying our mind, but we are focusing on bringing Jesus's presence in the room with us is very helpful, and or just stillness, right? We don't have to over spiritualize it. We can just be still in the quiet. So we'll do a little exercise that takes a couple minutes at the end here. And I would suggest doing that first to ground yourself as our heads can start spinning and we don't know which direction to go in. Just taking a moment to breathe and to ground ourselves before doing something like that. Very cool. Is that a question? So when you use Bethany, oh, sorry, that was private. I'm sorry. I'll answer that question privately. My bad. Zoom, I'm glad I didn't say anything. Not used to this. So I'll get to that question maybe after. Okay, well, let's do that exercise that will be really helpful for all of us. And I don't know about you, but I like to be on the go. I'm, you know, on one thing to the next, and a lot, like you said, Lindsay, is on my mind. And I'm not, and I think at least in the Christian world that I grew up in, of like meditation was so taboo, right? And even still, some of the ministry groups I'm a part of, they like won't even use that word because of the Eastern, you know, connection and religion. But Jesus meditated. The scripture says to meditate, right? And we can meditate on the word, we can meditate on God's presence, and that's so powerful. And sometimes it's hard for me to even get there, right? So meditating can also just be a place of stillness and quiet, that can help us to be able to meditate with the Father and with Scripture. So we're going to do an exercise right now. If you can, if you want to, if not, no pressure. But we're going to do I'm going to lead you through a guided, just grounding place for you. So get comfortable. Just going to be a couple minutes. And then I'll also send a couple resources out of things that you can use outside of here, an app that I like and stuff. So we'll just take a couple minutes. I want you to get comfortable. You take a deep breath in. Roll your neck if you need to. Close your eyes if you feel safe to do so, if you feel comfortable, if you can hear my voice. That's all you'll need to hear. Might take a moment. Again, breathe in through your nose for 4 seconds, and then exhale through your mouth for 4 seconds. And just notice that rhythm of breathing. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. And exhale, 2, 3, 4. And as you notice the rise and fall of your chest, the oxygen coming in and out, just notice any tension that you're carrying in your body at this moment. Maybe it's your neck or shoulders are tense, maybe your back. I want you to focus on the area of tension and breathe into that space. We're not trying to fix it, we're just noticing those parts of your body that are communicating tension to you. Any sensation. Just become in tune and aware of your body that God created so perfectly, so beautifully. And just notice the rise and fall of your chest as you focus on those areas of tension that need a little extra oxygen to those areas. And now I want you to notice maybe an emotion, maybe a top emotion you feel right now. Maybe it's sadness, maybe it's peace, maybe it's content, maybe it's agitated or anxious. Just notice a part, just one emotion that you can identify right now in your body as you continue to breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth, at your own pace. And I just want you to notice that emotion. We're not trying to fix it or change it. We're just noticing what's present in your body right now. And now what I want you to do is imagine a peaceful place in your mind, a peaceful, safe place, just you, no one else, a place that feels good to you. Maybe a place you've never been before, a place that is calm, safe, peaceful. I want you to notice the colors in that place. Notice the temperature. Notice how it feels to be there. Maybe even notice the sounds that you hear in that peaceful, calm, safe place. And again, notice your breath as you're resting in that place for a moment. Notice there's nothing you have to do there, nowhere you have to be. Just a little break for yourself to rest. And then go ahead and enhance that place, make it even better. If you could add anything to make it even more peaceful, more safe, go ahead and add that. And take a couple nice deep breaths in that place. Inhale through your nose, exhale through your mouth. And when you're ready, you could gently open your eyes and bring yourself back into your room that you're in. Yeah, good. So I want you to give that place a name. Maybe it is your oasis. Maybe it's your cabin in the mountains. Um, maybe it's a cozy place in a hammock. I want you to give that place a name And know that you can access that place anytime you need. Anytime you need a little mental vacation, take a couple minutes, get your body comfortable, take some deep breaths in and out, slow your pace, and then go ahead and go back there in your mind as your peaceful place, as your calm place. Some people go there, they interact with Jesus there. Some people interact with Holy Spirit there. Sometimes they just have peace and quiet in that place where they don't feel pressured to be productive or get anything done. So I want you to have that place to go to when you feel you need to be grounded, when your mind is spinning, when you can't go to sleep, when all those times. I want you to take that. Took 5 minutes, right? Just to be mindful of your breathing, and then go to a beautiful place in your mind with that brings peace and rest. All right. Hope you were able to learn a little bit more about yourself today, and use those tools to be a little bit more insightful, and to meet your own needs in this time, because we're having to face a lot of that. And then practicing that communication will be really helpful as well. So if you have any questions, let me just type my email in real quick. And if you did have any questions that I didn't see, that I didn't answer, please email them to me at madi.lcsw@gmail.com. Thanks for joining. Take time again to reflect on your notes and to implement these exercises to actually help yourself and revisit when things feel like you need to, okay, what's my game plan here? So